Alright, hello, citizens of the Nigelverse. It is Nigel here once again, and welcome back to the Labyrinth. Today on Dixie's Tales from the Labyrinth, which, if you're new here, first of all, welcome, but I read poetry, and I read 5 poems in total, 3 for myself, written by myself, because I do love to write poetry, and then 2 from other poets. But we got some interesting and kind of cool poems for Dixie's Tales from the Labyrinth. And I know I say that pretty much every time, but poetry is just so cool and so fascinating to me, and I love it so much. But without further ado, let's get right into it. This first one is called Water. Sometimes I sit by the lake, or a pond, or even just my bathroom sink, watching as the water flows out, wishing I could be just as free. Um, Now, I don't always sit at the bathroom sink, just so you know, but yeah, just seeing the way water flows, how it looks and feels so free, whether it's at the sink or by the lake, by the pond, by the ocean, by the sea, or wherever, or your body of water of choice is, just seeing how it flows and how it looks and feels so free. Just something about it is just fascinating. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but it just fascinates me how it just flows and just looks so free while flowing. And even if something's in the way, oftentimes it'll just go around it. And nature, I think in general, fascinates me, and I think I get that from my dad because he loves to watch nature shows and stuff like that. But uh, yes, something about it's just fascinating, just beautiful to look at, especially when like the light hits the water. But just seeing the way the water flows nice and free, it's something spectacular, honestly. But this next one is called Little Things. I have to remind myself often to stop for a little bit and appreciate little things, stopping to see the flowers, seeing happy faces filled with joy, to remind myself, even in the darkest days, light shines through. I don't know about you guys, but I know I've had plenty of dark days in my life, and but what I try to do, as I talk about in the poem, is I try to remind myself, not just not just that I'll get through it, and keeping that hope that I'll get through what I'm going through, but also seeing just little things that make me happy, whether it's the flowers or sometimes the animals running around. Well, some of them, so others of them are a bit nerve wracking at times. But seeing how some of the animals roam around, or just hearing good news from my friends, seeing happy smiling faces, which I think I've talked about in another poem that I've read here on Tales from the Labyrinth. But yeah, so just the little stuff and being able to see the little stuff and just to embrace and appreciate the little stuff, I think is so important and so cool, and it's what helps me get through a lot of days. This next one is called Nostalgia. I often reminisce about my childhood, shows I used to watch, games that I used to play, things I used to like. Although most of these things are physically gone, they remain with me in my heart. Nostalgia, of course, is pretty much reminding you of stuff from when you were younger, stuff in your childhood, like old TV shows you used to watch back in the day. Hey, of course, I was a big Cartoon Network kid. It so was stuff like Codename Kids Next Door, or like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, or Ed, Ed and Eddie, like shows I used to grow up watching, or games I used to play back on my PS2 and stuff like that. Just stuff that when I remember it and when I think about it, just makes me smile. Like whether I see on like YouTube, seeing videos of other people talking about it from my childhood, or just seeing or hearing people talk about it on like social media, or when I'm with around like friends, or even just other groups of people in there talking about it. It oftentimes it brings a smile to my face and brings some joy in my heart. That piece of me is still there in that form, that it's never really left. That piece of me is still there, even though it may not physically be there anymore. A lot of the shows that have come and gone. First of all, there's reruns, which is good, but also a lot of stuff stays with you in here. The moment you felt when you first saw it, and think that, and that's the whole purpose of nostalgia, and that's why I think a lot of companies and stuff try to sell nostalgia, because nostalgia ultimately sells. People like to be reminded of their childhood and everything, and But this next one is called Ways of Talking, and this is by Ha Jin. And if I mispronounce any of these names, I do apologize. But we used to talk. We used to like talking about grief. Our journals and letters were packed with losses, complaints, and sorrows. Even if there was no grief, we wouldn't stop lamenting, as though longing for the charm of a distressed face. Then we couldn't help expressing grief. So many things descended without warning. Labor wasted, loves lost, houses gone, marriages broken, friends estranged, ambitions worn away by immediate needs. Words lined up in our throats for a good whining. Grief seemed like an endless river, the only immortal flow of life. After losing a land and then giving up a tongue, we stopped talking of grief. Smiles began to brighten our faces. We laugh a lot at our own mess. Things become beautiful, even hailstones in the strawberry fields. So the things that Ha is talking about here it is you see a lot about grief and talking about grief and the things that he and the whoever he's talking to, which may be one person, maybe more than one person, the things they used to go to and kind of reminiscing about how they used to talk a lot about their problems and everything, and talking about all that they've gone through. But now compared to now that they've now that as he put it, lost a land and gave up a tongue, where her I'm guessing moving to a different country, he now they're no longer talking grief. Now they're happy, and kind of reflecting on the then versus now is kind of the theme I'm getting from this poem, and that's something that I feel like we all do. I especially do from time to time. I remember like dark days, back to those dark days as I mentioned before, that I used to have like moments where I didn't know what was next, where I was uncertain about stuff, versus now where things have improved and become much better. Or seeing that contrast sometimes is refreshing, and reminds you how far you've come since before. So sometimes reminiscing about bad stuff of it is does suck and it is bad, but sometimes it may be beneficial, such as this case here. And this last poem is called Quiescence, and this is by Alyse Knorr. And it actually starts off with a quote here. All who have stood in a mother's hand are sure to die because they were born. And that quote is by Zai Young Ming. Again, if I mispronounce these names, I apologize. But now we get into the poem itself. Between us bobs the baby, solemn in her infant wetsuit. The pool is the only place where screaming does not indicate terror. The neighbors' pansy beds. Oh, to lie down in those beds and doze. Greener than grass, says Sappho, originator of envy. My sleep is pollinated by the baby's wails, dreams sprouting voices in peril, mine sped up and emaciated like a greyhound in the track. The end of growth is death. The painting begins with a scribble, or is a scribble the finishing touch? Call your plants by their names. 10,000 words a day. We feed, we weed, we read her books about owls. What am I minding but stillness? What have I grown except loss? So a very dark poem here, and if you look up the dictionary definition of quiescence, it's inactivity or dormancy. So almost like things aren't happening. But what we see here is kind of seeing their child, seeing Alyse's child here, her as a young child, but also keeping in mind that the baby will eventually grow older into an adult and eventually pass away. Hey, so kind of bringing that mortality into the poem here as we see, and sadly, ultimately, the end of life is death. But of course, in between that time is where it counts. Like what you do between the time you were born and the time you pass away is ultimately the most important. But interesting way how it's going about showing in the eventual mortality that the child will eventually grow, and eventually pass away when they're older. But older, and I feel like it's done in a really interesting and creative way. How, oh, excuse me, we see the juxtaposition of childlike things such as like scribbles or reading books, or excuse me, the child swimming, eventually knowing where it will lead later on in life. So kind of a dark poem, but kind of an interesting way to go about it. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor. Like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, turn on post notifications, every time I upload a video so you can see as soon as it drops. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on these poems. Did you dislike the poems? Did you dislike my analysis of the poems? And what are your thoughts and your analysis of what each poem means? But thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.